creating cosmos out of chaos.
I thought it was a waste of time to watch movies and all of these things. And then when I first saw these movies that are real life, mission-based movies that were coming out at that time, I was like, oh, this is big. This is a
What
big deal.
movie was it of Kip's that triggered that for you?
Cowspiracy.
Yeah.
It was basically the same year Cowspiracy and Exit Through the Gift Shop, the Banksy film, came out.
Oh, wow.
And those two films completely shattered my paradigm on being like a kind of anti-movie guy, because I thought it was a waste of time, to being like, oh my goodness, this is the thing. This is how you shift massive, paradigms.
Wow, that's
sure.
incredible. And what about you, Kip? What brought you to start really putting your heart and soul into this kind of creative work that you do?
Well, film was a deep passion of mine since a kid, and so it was always a dream to make films and make movies. Initially, it was just to make a movie, and I would do meditations before I was meditating, but like visualizing, seeing a little thumbnail on Netflix, like literally visualizing, one of those thumbnail films. And at the time, I didn't know what that was going to be. But that's what's sweet is when I went through my transformation and I felt the deeper purpose of finding out, like when you watch Cowspiracy, the environmental impacts and the different impacts of what it means to raise and kill animals. And I saw that this story needs to be told in different ways. Then it became a purpose. Then it just became my love and passion for films to create something that will make a difference, rather than just like, I want to make the next, Top Gun or something. If you do something for a passion, and especially I feel it helps when it's beyond yourself or something for something else, that it makes it easier too. Like, I don't know, I felt, on this whole journey with these films, we've had a lot of support from other people that are part of the movements that we've been on, and as well as, say, the animals. We always feel the animals are the true producers. So a lot of support, but it's been a fun journey.
The why, like the purpose-driven creation, I like how you say that, like, makes it easier. Because I think a lot of people, like, they really want to do things. They really want to, like, figure out, like, I want to make music, or I want to make films, and there's this innate, like, need to express through creativity. But I totally resonate with that, because as soon as there's a deeper purpose to it, all of a sudden, it's not really about the end result for what it means to you. It's almost like an end result about what it means to other people. It's like giving your gift for the first time. And I find for us, like in our work, like we started making yoga videos, and we wanted to do it to just be of a deeper service. And the minute we got our first bit of feedback, that's when all of a sudden we're like, oh, people are doing these. Yeah. Like, we put so much energy into it, and the first time someone left a comment on a video, it was like, oh, this is cool. Because all of a sudden it's like, it gives, like, then that's that little bit of fuel that you can, like, get another bit of fuel and another bit of fuel. Yeah. I mean, how, for you, like, when you decided to make your first film, like, was there a lot of resistance internally for you?
There not too much resistance. It was more, I had no idea how to do it, but it had to be done. There was no way. And at that time, my background is, my major is entrepreneur, and I always realized I needed to make a little bit of money before relying on a starving artist. But I would tell people, I'm going to make this film. And they'd be like, sure you are. And I told, like, Cowspiracy was a process of about 6 years before that. I found this information out, even though in the first 5 or 10 minutes, it looks like I just found that out. Like most documentaries, a lot of times you found that out earlier. But I didn't know how I was going to make the film, but it had to be done. And everyone said, no, it can't. It makes too much money, da-da-da. But just working on it. So I never had a doubt. But what I realized, I didn't have the tools. So I started doing wedding videos. Because I just had a passion for film, and I felt I had a good eye. I started doing wedding videos, because that would help with documentary filmmaking. That's one of my biggest recommendations for anyone trying to do any creative content. Do wedding videos. And I used to do wedding videos where I didn't get hired. I would go wedding videos and say, I'll do this for free. The day of, I was in San Diego, be like, hey, I see you're doing a wedding today. Can I just film you? Sure. Because there's something about the dynamic action of everything going on. And when the bride is dancing and you want to have the father behind, so you rack focus and like all these things that you have to be working really fast. But then the big tool is that what really helped me was doing yoga. I felt I didn't have the full alignment, like I wasn't balanced. And so after about 6 years of working on that and just starting it, different people working with Cowspiracy, didn't work out. And then I did Jivamukta yoga teacher training. And then a few months later did Kundalini yoga teacher training in India under Gurmukh. And that was for, not to be necessarily yoga teachers, that I wanted that, those tools and that alignment. And like, and the Kundalini one is what really, when I came back from 23 days of India, Kundalini yoga from 3:30 in the morning to 7 at night, came back. 10 days later, I met Keegan, who was my co-director of that time. And 10 months later, the film was finished.
Wow.
And like the power of yoga and the power of these things are just really, we have a passion, but we don't know how to do it. So you have to have all these other tools that you need to do.
That's
So
amazing.
What do you think yoga gave you?
first, it gave balance in my life. I was out of balance. I was in San Francisco and living a certain lifestyle. It gave balance in that way, to alignment, to, again, like really getting in touch with the different chakras. I was really strong in some chakras and some I wasn't. And then I could be very flighty, but I didn't have that groundedness where I always felt like push the energy up, but you need that foundation. And then Kundalini Yoga gave the magnetic field of foundation of just like the whoo, and then just zzz, and then the vision, like that third eye, just like, and then I came back from Kundalini Yoga teacher training, and people looked at me, and because I didn't tell anyone I was going, and they just looked like, what happened to you? What happened to you? Just transformed, and it's like a DNA shift. And then I felt my purpose. I knew how to do it without knowing, and then just like you on a certain frequency and a vibration, and that led to Keegan and the random but not random, and then 10 months later, that film was finished. So
That's incredible. Wow. And it's, when you speak about like finding this alignment, it's beautiful because what I see, the work that you both do, you are speaking for the voiceless, right? You are giving them a voice. Finally, somebody is doing that for the animals. For so many centuries, we've just been pushing them to the side, treating them as they're not living sentient beings. And finally, these films that you create are giving them a voice. But it's also that voice that you're giving them is, it seems to me like it's, as you're explaining, gave you this beautiful purpose, which is amazing to watch and to align with. When that happened to you, do you felt like it took away that fear that you might have had to release a film that would trigger a lot of people?
absolutely, it was kind of like not a death to the ego, but we were talking before. I wanted to make films, but it was like a rocket ship with no substance in it. But when you have something that is for a purpose and it genuinely is for others, it then became, it didn't matter if this made 1 penny or nothing, just like this information has to get out, as you said, like a voice for the voiceless, not only the voiceless, but a voice for the planet and the environment.
Hello friends, I hope you're enjoying this episode right now. I just wanted to let you guys know that Kip and Kam's new film, Christspiracy, is almost about to be released, and you can learn all the information about it by going to Christspiracy.com. Mark and I have already seen this film, and I can tell you from my heart it is mind-blowing. So I highly recommend you check it out.
It all led to then, after all these experiences, into the birth of Cowspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember actually one of the things that made us really happy, because we saw your film before that, well, Cowspiracy, and then I think afterwards we heard that Leonardo DiCaprio got on board with you for that film particularly.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
We thought it was fake. One, the film was finished, and James Cameron, one of those moments, especially the first film where just if it gets seen by anyone, but then all of a sudden we found out James Cameron watched the film and he gave us a phone call.
Wow.
And it's one of those, don't have to do anything again, because he's a big hero. He was going to come on as a producer, and at that time, he's a really cool guy. At the time, he wanted to change a couple things. He didn't want to use, there's a word vegan in there. He was very sensitive to that word. Rightfully so. It's a triggering word, especially 10 years ago. And then eventually says, you know what, you've all finished this film. Like, I want to let you all, just release that on your own. And then right after that, Leonardo DiCaprio, through his right-hand woman, gave us a call and says Leo wants to help take this to Netflix, and we're like, yeah, right. And then 2 days later, like called again, like, no, really, this is like, he wants to be the honorary executive producer. He just has this deal with Netflix to take films to Netflix, and this will be the first one. It's like, wow, it was amazing. And so super grateful for him. And he was really sweet. He's like, this has to be told, and people need to know this. So he is honorary executive producer, and really grateful for him. And
For sure.
Generally a nice guy, which is cool.
Yeah.
Did you watch the film with him, or did like?
No, he watched it through,
Is it Darren?
yeah, Darren Aronofsky. If you know him from Pi, did Noah,
Oh
Requiem
yeah,
for a Dream.
for sure.
Pi, that film Pi was one of my most influential films. He watched it, and while he watched it, he was on a plane, and Leo was working on Before the Flood. So it's called
Right.
Before
Yeah,
the
before
Flood.
the flood.
And they couldn't figure out how to do the story. You know, they couldn't figure out how to do it, and they've been working on it for a couple of years. He says, you have to watch this film. And then he watched the film, and yeah, he loved it. And then it's funny, I saw Mark, who's Mark, the one who does the Incredible Hulk?
Oh, Ruffalo.
Oh, Mark Ruffalo,
He's
yeah.
an amazing person. We saw him in Toronto, and he recognized me. He's like, Cowspiracy guy. He's like, Leo called us up last week. He brought everybody in, told us we had to sit there all day long. We watched. He's like, we're supposed to be a meeting about Before the Flood, but we watched Cowspiracy, and then talked the entire time of how to incorporate that in
That's
to Before the Flood.
like
So
how
that was
did
cool.
at that point in the journey for you? How did that feel?
It felt like we were onto something special.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those when you're making a film, you're so in it that you watch the film, and after a while you're just jaded to every fact in there, and you're like, I don't even know if this is good or if this is like nothing really triggers me much. You know? And then so you hear these other people that you respect, like a James Cameron particularly,
Yeah.
saying this is good. It's like, wow. So it's just really just beyond grateful, because again, when it's doing it for something else, it's just like, you know, helping the animals out. It's almost like this is the animals made this film, and now their story can be told, or the planet's story and this truth. And so that's a big experience that Cam and I had for this film.
Because you meet a lot of resistance, like from like institutional resistance and cultural resistance. And I know that Cowspiracy, you had your fair share, and I think every film, probably previous to release, then after release as well. In Cowspiracy at the start, like that was your first time dealing with it, like people trying to shut you down. What was that like?
It was tough, because at the first you see these comments and you get really, it's like, oh my God, someone doesn't even.
Yeah.
And then they say a fact that you know is not true, and it's like, which wolf do you want to feed? And that wolf you feed, and sure enough, at the beginning, learning the lesson is that feeding that, then it gets that much bigger of something that is just completely false.
Can you explain the wolf thing? Because I love that, and I
Well,
think
it's
that's
like
powerful.
Well, actually, I think someone else could explain that even better.
It's basically, my understanding of it, it's an indigenous or Native American maybe even proverb that there's two wolves. One of them represents like greed and lust and the lower emotions, the lower forms and desires. The other one represents harmony and peace and ultimately truth, all of those. And the end of the story is which one wins, whichever one you feed. So we have that present, those aspects present to all of us, but we choose actively daily to feed the more loving aptitude.
Yeah, a big thing of probably a lot of the Secret, the documentary, and the law of attraction. That was one of the biggest transformations in my life when that came out, of realizing that. And so when these I always have to remember that when these reviews that were just completely false, and especially with What the Health, wanting so badly to just put a lot of energy into this and say no, and this is why, and it's like, no, we were working on this film, and that's why What the Health, all these things came out, and we're saying there's going to come a time where these will be addressed and we'll learn the truth, but we need to feed we need to feed this
The good
film,
wolf, yeah.
and we need to be efficient with our precious energy.
Yeah.
But it is difficult, especially when you know that what they're saying is not only not true, but it can be shown to not true. And so what we're doing with the release of this film after, it's kind of backtracking. We're going to be doing open conversations and open debates with the health. I really wanted to do this. And we asked about 3 or 4 doctors that fully came out against the film to have an open, unedited discussion with Michael Greger, anyone in the film. And they said no. And so we won't even say that, no, and we show the emails.
Wow.
And so it's just all talk, and it's very difficult, especially that film. But
Yeah, I mean, you went on the doctors.
yeah.
For What the Health.
Oh, yeah. And they tried to set
What's
us
the
up.
deal there?
Yeah, how was that experience for you?
Oh my
Because it
God.
seemed very intense.
They did not. And it's the little things too, especially being a filmmaker, of knowing the little tricks where they didn't tell us that's what they were going to do.
What?
But until we were in the green room, someone came in and said, "Oh yeah, so when you go out there, you're going to be sitting on the front row, like in the audience,
I know that was.
Yeah.
front row down here in the audience." And the guy in the projector, he's way up here.
Yeah.
It's like a 50-foot screen. The doctors are up here, and here's me and Dr. Garth Davis, and right then we're like, okay, this is gonna be. And then what was funny about that is we're so confident, and especially in that film, there's so many things that we could go on and specify. Every part of that film is true. That the one example that he brought up, he's talking about the egg facts and the
The 5
eggs.
cigarettes, right? 1 egg equals to 5 cigarettes.
And then he talked about, I think it was actually she mentioned she mentioned the study to refute that, refute something about eggs. That was the exact same study we had in the film that was funded by the egg industry. So she is quoting studies and data from the egg industry. So it's just an example of like and then to be compassionate too, where they don't realize it. Like, she thought she was telling true facts. She thought she was defending eggs because they're healthy or whatever, and she doesn't realize that she's getting fed this where it comes from. But that was a funny one.
It seems
I felt
like-
more bad for Dr. Garth Davis.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we watched it and it just felt like it was like an attack. And there was a point where everybody was yelling and bickering, and it was just almost childlike, of like children
like
arguing
children.
about, and I understand because, the topic of food and what we eat and what we put on our plates 2 times a day, it's a very sensitive topic for everybody. We understand. And especially when you're trying to challenge the way people have lived their lives for many, many years, it's triggering. And people don't want to confront that and actually open their minds. A lot of people do, of course, but some, they build a big resistance to it. So when you're bringing these kinds of topics in front of them, of course the first reaction would be no. Like, they resist, right? Because, I mean, I don't know why, but it's just the way our human psyche is.
Well, what's interesting is
Yeah.
the big why it's such a resistance, is what we explore in this film. And that's the one that it's that ethical and that side of who am I really, and at the end of the day, even with What the Health, is it okay to eat physically? Is it okay to eat some animal flesh or dairy or whatever? Probably it's okay. Like, we even said at the end, my narrative at the very end, it's probably okay to do this.
Yeah.
But when you see the social impacts, what it causes to people in North Carolina, the runoff, when you watch Cowspiracy, but we didn't even mention the animal in What the Health or Cowspiracy, other than slightly. But there's this deep, deep connection that we have to our brothers and sisters, part of the animal world, that it's very triggering to confront, that we do in this film, of like, wait, what exactly are we doing, and why am I? Yeah, when you make that connection that this is an animal. So,
I mean, to go to the
Yeah.
the root of that, and we're sort of getting into an ethical side and the environmental side. Like, to you guys, like, what does being vegan mean to you guys, personally speaking?
being vegan is, it's an evolving answer, because if you would have asked me 15 years ago, say it's about standing up for the animals, not eating other animals, and da 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 da, and now it's about compassion. Like if I would say one, and it's about compassion with humans too. It's about compassion with their journey. It's about as being as compassionate as you possibly can. A lot of people say, oh, you're vegan, you're still killing insects or some rodents if you're doing that. It's a journey. It's a journey. It's being as possible, you know, if you wanted to switch the word out, the word's vegan. But yeah, if we just used, you know, I'm compassionate or I'm doing my best to live for others. It just so happens this word vegan is one word. So it's definitely a journey. That's for sure.
I love that because I think I resonate with it so like similarly, from where I started to where I am today, and recognizing the imperfections and the falling, the being really passionate at times and being very passive at others, but also, you know, the common thread of just when I look back, the dots connect, and it's like my imperfection as a human is part of that story, even before I made decisions to change what I put on my plate. And I have deep empathy for anyone on any part of that, because it's not easy. Nothing in life is easy. But to say that at every point on that journey, I was doing my best is the best thing I can look back at, to be able to hopefully be able to speak to. And to that's why it's so hard to me when I hear, like, because the word vegan is so triggering to people. I like that, like, eliminate that and just say, like, we're just trying to be human in a way that is sort of humane as best as we can, and as imperfect as we can. And it gets lost a lot in the rabble rousing of everyone's emotional reactions to the reflection of someone being like, I'm a vegan, and then someone immediately looks at themselves and goes, well, why are they and why am I not? And how do I measure up? And do they think they're this and I'm not? And it's really not about any of that. It's a very personal thing to me. And I don't talk about it a lot. I tend to not. But I know that I should more, because to live in an example of trying to be your best, the only way I've learned to do that is by looking at other people doing that. And I think that's so important, and it gets lost in so much of the, like, this study this and this study that and this nutritional fact this and this that. It's like, at the end of the day, we just, you know, it's an ethical choice. We just have to make our best choice and stand by it.
That's really well said. That reminds me of what the health. It got so in the debates, and I realized it's so about physical health. And I couldn't wait to start this film, because there's an element of physical health and there's an element of spiritual health. And like I was saying earlier about dissolving yourself and just tapping into the ethers of everything and all the micro macronutrients of all the beings and all the sun and everything. When you're tapping into that, you're just so full into a whole nother way that, sure, I could eat, you know, some animal products and be physical, but again, in my personal experience, when you know, as my journey continues, I've never felt so, you know, expansive and full by that type of health.
Right.
Well, you can.
Yeah, I not too long ago in my journey had a blessing of having veganism redefined through someone posing a very strong question to me, which the backstory on it is coming from my past deep in religion with church and everything, which we kind of explore in this film. We go into the religious, ethical, spiritual aspect. And it's funny because I had my own journey going in. I come from, you know, my stepdad owned a barbecue restaurant growing up. I hunted with a Christian youth hunting camp, all these things. So I had, you know, the typical background in all of it. And in my 20s, that was when I started to explore more deeply that and asking these kind of questions. And specifically, some of those questions begin to rub against my spiritual beliefs or my religious beliefs in certain ways. And I would have those conversations with my community, which would become very tense. Like, we're talking about a lot of pushback. But over time, because of my questions, I kind of got coined in my community as that guy, you know, to the point where even from the pulpit of religious gatherings at church and whatnot, there would be jokes, like vegan jokes made, because it's in LA. At this time I was in LA, and they would make jokes about actors and everything, and vegans as well, which I could laugh at and think was funny. But the one particular guy that was one of the most resistant in my community, one day he said something to me that I was like, wow, thank you for that gift. That was so powerful. He looked at me, he said, you know what my issue is with it? He said, is that you're defining, or this ideology is defining itself by what it doesn't do, which is, we don't eat animals, or we don't oppress animals. He's like, what do you do? And I sat with it and I was like, wow, that's actually really powerful. Yeah, that's worth exploring. And I think when I sat with it, I was like, man, they're, obviously helping animals, rescuing animals, being a support system to changing the paradigm on how the agricultural system goes. But it doesn't just stop with animal agriculture, plant agriculture as well. We got to plant more fruit trees. We got to create systems that aren't monocrop based for our vegetable agriculture systems. We got to work on subsidies. We got to work on so many aspects that I think it's like, for me, over the last couple of years, which going into this film, I fully am seeing it actualize as, what does it mean and what do we do now? What are we actually going to actively do? So for me, it's about redefining the system so that, these people that, including myself, I was one of them, that are so resistant to the idea, it's because we grew up in a system that didn't have people actively shifting it, so it made it easier to find more plant-based options or more just more understanding and connection around compassion. So I think that's what it means for me, is what we're doing about it.
That's so beautifully said. Wow. And when did you both come together to start creating film?
Well, as you see in the film, when you watch the film, I always knew there was going to be, Cowspiracy was the environmental impacts of raising, killing and eating 80 billion animals per year. And then what the health was, the health impacts. Seaspiracy was on the ocean. It was kind of a tangent with Allie, and it's a separate story of how we worked on that. But this one, the ethical and spiritual relationship and the consequences and the results of what that means as a community, as a species, that we raise and kill 80 billion animals and eat them. What's the relationship? How does that work? And then where did that come from? And that was, all three of those were supposed to be in Cowspiracy. Cowspiracy was supposed to be environment, health, and ethics. And as we were making that film, we had a yoga section in there, very powerful one. That was the last thing to get edited out. I was like, no, we can't. And I'm glad it did. We had the thing about the Dalai Lama and Buddhism, but we were doing test screenings. They said it was too much. So at that time, I was like, oh my gosh, we have to make 3 films. And it was daunting. But so this ethical one was always the one that was dearest to me. For several reasons, but it took a long time. And after What the Health, Keegan was already working on a lot of projects. It's very intense working on films. We did 2. We needed a break, and he wanted to do some things. I wanted to do some things. He's an atheist, and for him, being a vegan is just purely social justice. It's not about being about spiritual. He'd be like, I'm not spiritual. I'm just, if there's someone on the street and you want to help them up, it's just like a very logical thing for him. So I realized would need to work on this film with someone else. And then magically, the animals and powers that be, what was it? 7 days after Keegan and I had the official conversation, you're going to work on different things. I just kind of meditated on it, and then I met Cam at a Cowspiracy screening at a Greenfest, and I knew there was something about this Jesus question and about religion, because it was going to be a part of it. Where does this come from? In Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and realized it never really been asked before. But I had no idea, and then met Cam, and then we just hit it off right there, and it was just like meant to be, of us working on this for the last 5 years now.
That's amazing. And that was such a powerful question that you asked, because you showed in the film that we watched yesterday, so thank you for that. But that question was like, wow. I don't know if I should say it or not, because I don't want to give away.
Hold off on this?
We'll hold off on that.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yes.
It's fantastic. And I think that these are some of the ethical questions and ideas that I think get left out of a lot of the conversations and covered up by nutritional facts and behavior, and is every person different, and all kinds of like higher level things. And I think that's why it comes into spirit to me, and into like the personal practice of like who we are on a day-to-day basis, and our behavior defines that, and based on a belief structure. So when it comes to the ethics of it for you guys, like what does it mean ethically? Veganism. Like, or to not partake. Like, why? Like, somebody listening to this, like, what would you say to someone who's like, I just don't understand? Of course we like,
We
isn't this
came
what we
from
do?
the
We're
Stone
humans.
Ages. That's how
Like, we
humans
come to,
evolved,
yeah, if we
and
come to the
we
root of it,
yeah.
like, where's the like, society and culturally, we all have been taught, and we live inside almost a prison of sort of cultural, this is what you're supposed to do. Now, somehow, miraculously, the four of us have found it in our lives to challenge that at different points. Maybe we'll get into that in a second, because I think that's a really interesting thing. Like, when does this decision come? But we're challenging a paradigm by choosing not to do something. Like, why should people challenge that?
It's a good question. And what's interesting is when you challenge that and you ask those questions, those deep questions, it leads to so many other questions about other things in life and making that connection. Because I feel the big thing is a disconnect that we don't, there's that saying, you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know, and we have this in the film about how we think that we have a freedom of choice of eating animals and that we choose this, and we don't realize that there's been this structure that has been happening for over 2,000 years that we explore in the film. And it's part of who we are. It's part of our culture. It's what my mom and dad taught me. It's what my mom, who gave me life, gives me life through food. And if you're saying this, you're questioning that, what else would I have to question? Because now you're questioning maybe the ethics of my mother. And it's very powerful. And a powerful book I recommend everyone reading is called The World Peace Diet by Dr. Will Tuttle. And he has a section on each one of these. And he has an entire section on the systemic reasons why we eat animals and why it is so personal to us. But when you challenge that, it's a big thing, because if you question that, which led to a lot of us where you might have to step away from your family structure, where it is something like you might have a difficulty eating Thanksgiving dinner or being an outcast, which Kam has a very extreme example of that, being an outcast in his entire community that he grew up in. And so it's like scary, you know?
Of course.
But then there comes a part where, you know, I guess it's just questioning and then tuning into, what you really feel.
Yeah.
What do you think that question is, though? The first thing you challenge?
That needs to be questioned is this something, like eating animals, is this something that my 7-year-old, 8-year-old inner child agrees with? And I've done probably a lot of inner child work systemically, but when you're asking that and you're saying, would if my 7-year-old version raised a chicken or a duck and then that time was supposed to be harvested, killed, that word harvest, would I personally kill that? And I wouldn't. And so then it doesn't align. And it's very simple. And then it comes to a point where wanting to help that animal, because I think a big thing that we've realized, or I've realized through this film, is about animal rights. A big part of this film, we talk about briefly a book called Unnatural Order. And what happened in human evolution is once humans took ourselves out of the animal kingdom. We were in the animal kingdom for so long. And then we took ourselves out of the animal kingdom. So when we talk about animal rights, it's not talking about ourselves and putting that back in.
That's
That these
interesting.
literally are our brothers and sisters. You know, when you talk about a cat and a dog, they're animals. They're, you know, we are too. And so I think that's the other thing too, of really honoring our bigger species of being animals.
Yeah. There's this idea, like, the relationship and like connection is a word that you said earlier, and I really love the idea of like focusing on that connection, and I think that's something that yoga has brought to us in a very powerful way, is the connectedness to everything, to the universe, to each other, to our brothers and sisters, and to sentient beings and the planet itself. And so culturally, everything's about disconnection these days, and encouraging more connection through the awareness, and just like you're saying, like to go back to the child, to go back to yourself internally, and really ask those difficult questions that do challenge. Like, I was ostracized from my family for the way I chose to eat at a very young age. I was ostracized from my friends. I was in a band. All my band members hated me all of a sudden because because I thought something different than them. Got kicked out of the band, and on and on and on. But I think there's a truth in it that if you find the strength to face the ostracization and the alienation, the universe will bring the people and the community around you that will then support you in that. And I think that's something that's really hard for people to imagine. Like, oh,
How will I do Christmas dinner
Yeah,
with my family if I can't partake in the eating of the turkey or something?
But
right?
fast forward a decade later, and I was cooking a vegan Christmas dinner in my 20s for my family, and they were trying food for the first time, and then also questioning these things, which is it's so.
I love what you say about that, Mark, the truth. And it's about finding what's true to you and it feels true in your heart and your soul, and not allowing the external influences of our society and the world shift that truth. And something that was really beautiful to also hear from your guys' story is how, to go back to the films, you did the Cowspiracy, the What the Health, there was this deal with Netflix that you had once Leonardo DiCaprio got you there. And then you guys took it, following your truth, to this next film. And maybe you could speak a little bit about that and how the journey you've been going through with Netflix and everything that you're doing.
Yeah, so this one, I have a lot of respect for Netflix. I'm so grateful for them. They've gone through their transitions over the years. They were a different company 9 years ago, really honoring the free spirit of making films, very experimental. And like, I don't even know if nowadays Cowspiracy or What the Health, I doubt, I'm not sure they would take. But anyway, as we started making, it was Seaspiracy in this film, at the Christspiracy at the same time. At that time, it was called Cowspiritual. It's a film on ethics and the way we relate to animals and the history of that. And without discussing it much, they thought that this film was going to be like this animal planet, like how religions just love animals and they're so beautiful and it's just we all get along, and some controversial things, but it felt as we got on, especially connecting with Cam, and as we started going down this road that we'll discuss in the next time of the podcast, really going deep, this story got just unbelievably like, wow, this is way huger. Like, there's one thing to talk about the core root of how the different religions come at the base and the core root of compassion for all beings, this and that. But as we started going down this storyline that you'll see in the film, it's a big topic. Anytime you're talking about Jesus, you're talking about religion, especially the times that we're living in, and Netflix being a publicly traded company. And this, with long story short, they wanted to take it, I guess the best way is a vanilla way. They were even making a separate edit as we were working on ours.
Wow.
We felt the story has to be told in its entirety. And so after a few years, as we kept going this, if anything, we found more information out. We go to, Oxford professors, we go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're going to all these incredible interviews one after another that kept building. And at that time, it kept on them wanting to go a certain way and us going a certain way. And then eventually, we made the very difficult decision of having to basically walk away from a Netflix original, which is what's one of those you can't think about, because it's, the impact of that and not knowing what to do next. Just like we felt we had to be true to the story. And definitely there was a lot of meditating on with the animals, what they feel, and the planet and everything. And we made the difficult decision of us splitting ways for this film, and us having to release this in our own way. And at that same time, even while working on this, a big part that happened is we went to India, and we go undercover in India in the dairy industry, in the leather industry, and the underground slaughterhouse. And it's very powerful. And as we went to India, we realized from people from India that this is what we're uncovering here is India's biggest conspiracy they have, what's happening to their cows. And that's when, like, Netflix isn't in India. And this was before all this was happening. And that's when, like, man, Netflix has 220 million subscribers, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But maybe a third are in the US, and we think it's the biggest thing in the world. But, I've been in Mexico, Netflix isn't that big. So that was another thing, realizing there's 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
And in India alone, 1.4 billion people that might not see this film. So that was another inspiration that made it a little bit easier of like, okay, we're going to do this somehow. Somehow we're going to tap into making this happen with a big community, which we'll talk about another time. That's really exciting. It's going to revolutionize how filmmakers and creators can not only release a film, but fund the film, have your own creative control. And that's the bigger picture of even this film in some ways. So.
Wow.
So you walked away from a Netflix deal, and now you're going to bring it into a model that people can get involved in its aspiring community.
Yes, and at the time, and just kind of backtrack, with Cowspiracy and Wealth Health, so grateful. At that time, each of those were the top 20 Indiegogo funded campaigns at the time.
Yeah.
And now Seaspiracy, that was a Netflix original. Community's grown, and now we want to expand it to just making a collaborative effort on getting this film that's so much more than just one specific thing. Again, it's about compassionate movement that's going to be massive. And with this film as well, what we couldn't do with, say, Seaspiracy, the other films, is we couldn't release all the other hundreds of hours of content. And with this film, we have just incredible interviews, incredible stories, and that's going to be shown releasing a film in a way that no one ever has.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's very special, and we'll discuss that again.
Yeah.
Yes, in the part 2.
Hey friends, I just wanted to interrupt real quick and let you know that the movie Christspiracy, which Kip and Kam co-created and is coming out very shortly, is incredible. Juliana and I saw it just before we shot this episode with them, and if you go to Christspiracy.com and sign up for their newsletter, they have some huge and important announcements coming up very soon.
For anyone listening, we're going to do a part 2 because upon the launch of that, I think the idea that you've not only inspired people to change how they relate to their food and to relate to the cultures that we all live inside, but I think this is so fucking cool because you're going to inspire creators to take back their sovereignty and to recognize that there's different ways that we can create in today's day and age. And it's, I mean, we felt passionately about this kind of topic because we've literally changed our lives and picked up a video camera and said, what can we do with our life? And like birthed Boho Beautiful out of just a camera and had no experience doing anything. And I think the stories of independent filmmakers, not only getting to the point that everyone says is the point. A Netflix deal is literally, like you said, like you visualized it when you were younger to have the little thumbnail. That's like that's the pinnacle moment. But then to stay true to the message of the project and walk away from that. Like
which wasn't easy.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Well, I was going to say at an emotional level, it was just bringing it up as we were talking about it, the emotions. I was thinking about, I never really connected this until this moment, but you know, my backstory was in the Christian music industry and secular as well. But you know, I moved to LA 2010 to pursue that even more professionally. I was in Nashville before that, but I got some opportunities, and I was a hired gun with all these, you know, bands that were signed to major record labels, but as a hired gun. And in the background for six years probably, I was working with a particular project to get it to the point of hopefully being signed. Meanwhile, the research and the things that I was discussing and some of the tensions that were being created around this topic were coming to a head. And literally the moment that we got signed by Sony Records was around the same moment that I realized, wow, I can't do this. Like I can't, I have to stay true to what this message is. And I know that I'll be sucked into this machine now, and playing that part and not able to have the time to go into this. And so that was around the same time that I decided to step away and rethink things, which was devastating. And then as you're thinking about it, like when I met him, I remember it being like, oh, it's a miracle story. I stepped away and now first film ever, Netflix film, because, you know, he's already got the history. I'm like, yes. And I was like, it all paid off. It makes sense. And then we get down a few years later, it's like, ooh, we got to do this again.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like height of 2020, you know, with the COVID stuff and everything was going crazy. And he and I just in the apartment in front of the computer, like, dude, we got to do this. We just got like, this is what we have to do. And it was very, very emotional. It was very exciting. And all those emotions transmuted and transformed now into this realization that we have of how much bigger it actually is. but it's been a journey. And I'm very passionate about the creator side because I have my friends in the music industry that are still in it, and I see the way that works out. And now the going deeper into these streaming platforms, which are great and have served a purpose, but for the creators, it's very, very challenging. And there's definitely a short end of the stick far too often that I feel we hopefully can be a part of transforming.
Yeah, new paradigm. Before doing this activism, I was a passionate filmmaker, and to be a creator, that's a really big passion of how to have your own voice, not be told how to do certain things, where you're a musician or filmmaker. So yeah, it's a beautiful endeavor that we're doing, that tapping into everything in the community. So we're all doing it together. So it's exciting.
Wow, that's so amazing. And how did it feel for you guys? Like, you had this idea, you're going to start this new film, right? And taking it to this new direction, a new topic and connection. And as you were diving deeper and deeper, I can imagine more things were coming to light. Like, how was that experience for the two of you to be just diving into these very intense topics?
It's surreal, especially with this one. In particular, I didn't grow up spiritual. I never went to church. My both parents are Mormon, and my dad was a rebel Mormon, and he loves telling the story. He was a bartender at like 18, and he loves telling the story that when they come to your door, knock on your door, like, Brother Lou, it's time for you to go on your mission. And he tells us a million times. He says, brothers, I'm a bartender. I don't think you want a bartender on a mission. So he never, and that's just who he was. He was just a rebel. And so we never grew up, never had anything, but that's what was really nice, because I had a clean slate. And then during college, I'm like, what is religion? What is spirituality? So I had a nice path. But then going down this journey, I didn't even know, getting too much into it, I didn't even know Jesus was a real person. I didn't know that he was an actual historical documented person. I thought it might have been a collection of, people at that time. And then going into this, going to the Dead Sea Scrolls, talking to theologians. It felt like we were transported, because we got so deep. It's that we were like sitting in the rooms of these people and finally hearing the truth come out of this story's been feels like covered up. We need to tell this story, and basically feel like time transported, and very powerful for me, because I've never had that experience. You came growing up with the Bible and religion, but going back 2,000 years, and this group of people just so incredibly powerful, and tapping into that frequency, like I think we were talking about earlier, is that it's like a frequency and a vibration, that consciousness, and it's like, whoa, jumping on that one, I'm getting chills now. I get it. And it's really exciting for me, because I never had that before. And then just realize there was something about Jesus, something about Mary I had a connection to. And then now, without giving too much away, I realize why, because it humanizes them in this film, and see the true character of who they were, and at the same time.
With you growing up with religion as such a part of your life and faith, how was this dimension of bringing that into play, of uncovering, like you said, a conspiracy of 2,000 years, around everything that you grew up with?
Well, there's a part of me talking about the inner child that was like, oh, this is Indiana Jones happening right now. We were in the trenches in these places, and uncovering these almost like relics, or these artifacts of truth that was so powerful.
It felt like that watching it.
Yeah,
that was what was really cool about it, actually.
Yeah, it swept into it, global, going to places that I, had never dreamed I would wind up in situations I would have never imagined I'd be in. So that, yes, surreal is a great word. But in that surrealness, experiencing such high level synchronicity, or actually we've been upgrading it, maybe serendipity is the word that we're using now, because it's very for the good connections where, in my religious past, definitely grew up in the religious aspect, but the spirituality and the connection that came through for me, where I always was able to find my true north, was serendipity, were these moments where I could see a higher force or a higher power at work guiding different steps and decisions. And man, this film and this journey has been such an elevated experience of that, where, I mean, we could have a whole podcast just on that topic of just these crazy moments that should not have happened, and they did. And so that's why when we talk about the animals protecting us, also the animals guiding us, also Jesus and, you know, Buddha and these figures, in a way, these stones and breadcrumbs have been left, but the people and the places, the connections has been insane. It's just so surreal. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's really like surrendering. It's kind of all the films, particularly this one, surrendering ourselves of what we want to do to make the film. And as we really surrendered, it's like, hey, we're going to lead the way. Go here, talk this. And it's like, whoa, and the perfect timing of when to talk to a certain person.
I mean, even for me meeting Kip, you know, that was probably about a year and a half deep into fully having stepped away from my community and my church and literally my band that I was playing with, and that was on its, you know, the fast track to Sony Records and all of that. And it was funny because it sounds so cliche, but towards the end of 2016, I wound up with some friends at Burning Man, and it's that cliche Burning Man story. But definitely while I was there was a moment where I surrendered to this idea of filmmaking, and had a very profound moment writing that in a journal, you know, setting it away as an intention at one of the installations there. And when I got back from Burning Man, amidst all kinds of synchronicities, I was so dead tired. It was my birthday week, so I went and had my birthday right after. And a friend of mine who does vegan raw chocolates that I help out with these demos, she said, "Hey, I want you to come to this event and help, you know, sell the chocolates." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so tired." And I was this close to telling her I wasn't going to do it. And then something in me was like, "No, you're on this wave. Like, take that initiative, take that leap." And so I went there, and it was the silliest festival. It was not a very good. It was an environmental festival, and there were so many things about it that were a little off. And so after my shift helping her out, I was like, you know, I'm just going to leave. And then right as the moment I was about to leave, a friend that I recognized walked by, and I said, "Oh, it's my friend. Okay, I'll go chat with him." We start walking around the corner, and we wind up around the corner to a Cowspiracy screening. And I was like, wow. Wow, that's that film. And then the rest is history from there. But it's all these little moments too, I think, when you asked before about these questions or these moments, you know, of truth and following your truth. A lot of times for me, like in that moment, I didn't want to go to this thing, but it's like learning how to tune into that small voice that's like saying something maybe even different than what your physical body is ready to do, but you know that your soul is like pulling you towards.
Yeah, and guiding you into places that are sometimes uncomfortable as well, and like facing that resistance. And that's something I applaud both of you for what you did with all of the movies, really, not just the latest one, but everything that you do is you show a lot of difficult truths that comes to animal agriculture and consumption and such. And coming from somebody, Mark and I used to do this activism in Toronto where we would stand with signs in front of a pig slaughterhouse, and they would bring these trucks. Like, they slaughtered 10,000 pigs a day in the slaughterhouse, like downtown Toronto too, like the weirdest place ever. And we would stand with a group of activists and
Anita and the pig
Anita and the Pig Save. And well, two things. One, we would see the animals and you connect with them, look at them in the eyes, and then you would give them a moment of kindness and compassion. That's the only time they'll ever feel kindness and compassion. Sometimes we'd give them water because in the summer times they just stack all the animals into one place. And so we would do that, and then they would turn the corner and then go right into the slaughterhouse. And that was it. And I remember we did it every single morning for maybe a couple weeks. I remember that one summer. And I had to stop doing it because I started to feel my mental energy like I was going into a dark place. I was seeing death every single morning and trying to share my heart and crying and just like really connecting to these beings that, you know, it felt so hard. And it was a really a big awakening for me. And I found a different way to do my activism through what we do now with Boho Beautiful, of just guiding people into more understanding ways to eat and how to include plant-based eating into your diet, and not really showing that side from my work, but what you guys do and a lot of the things that I've seen, it's really difficult to watch. And I can't even imagine what it's like for the two of you to be filming this. And going, like you said, you went underground into these slaughterhouses. You went to, different festivals and different, or, things that happen, or, and how do you deal with cleansing and moving forward and continue on your path after seeing such cruelty and such violence?
Yeah, I think it's one thing is like you're mentioning is it's so honorable when you're doing these with the pig save, and there's one in LA where some people don't get it. Like, wait, you're going to give them a little bit of water and send them some love right before that, like, but when you're there, you get it, and it's something you can't describe. And there's something about the word that sometimes I don't use, like use the term a voice for the voiceless, because they have such a loud voice, and especially in times of distress. If you've ever heard a pig or a cow moan, when a cow loses her baby taken away for dairy, or a pig, their voice is loud, and we can hear it and we can understand it. We can understand it, just like you can your dog and your cat. But it is difficult being a witness sometimes, and it is one of those, we're the tool of these beings, and they're using us, and use me up. And sometimes it's just that I remember just feeling, really sad, especially first few years, and then having some powerful downloads of animals. We don't have time for you to be sad. Other people can be sad when you show them what's happening. You've been sad long enough. You've seen this. So we don't have time for that. How's that going to help me be you being sad? Now it's time to step up. And so that was one of those things. But it's difficult when you have to separate and disconnect of like going to the God of My festival. But it's really just kind of absolving yourself and just like, this is just a tool for something greater. And then other than that, you do, with that being said, you do have to cleanse yourself. I mean, these are literally entities that you're having nightmares. And as you know, I have a daily sadhana. And that's another thing about Kundalini Yoga. It helped me immensely, because I think I was taking too much in, where empathy and not being able to do this, and do I deserve this or does that? But having a very strong foundation of somehow literally cleansing yourself every day. And I personally do a daily sadhana. So it's almost like 15, 20 minutes. But I can come into it, whatever the nightmares are the night before. It's the very first thing I do before anything. And that's helped me immensely, because I clear things out. I set an intention for the day. I give gratitude for what the projects, and so that's helped me a lot.
So what is this sadhana process for you?
It's a combination of it's kind of a hodgepodge, because I did Jivamukti and Kundalini. So it's a little bit of yoga and a little bit of different Loka, Samasta, Sukhino, Bhavantu. May all beings be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and action of my own contribute some way to happiness and freedom for all. So some of that, and then visualizing that, and then with Kundalini, one of the ways all Kundalini meditations and Kriyas end is, may the long time sun shine upon you. May the, God, I say it so fast that sometimes, may the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you. May the pure light within you guide your way on. And I do this to everything in my life and all the projects I'm on. May the long time sunshine upon you, all love surround you, pure light within you, guide your way on. May the long time sunshine upon you, all love surround you, pure light within you. It's almost like one of those Tibetan mantras. It gets one of it, but it's the frequency of that, and then that's the cleansing of the different things that are happening, and then do it to the animals and the beings and the people I'm working with and family. So that's part of it, and then some gratitude stuff. It's kind of like this thing that's been evolving.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing.
It's been different for me every time, like after some of the really intense ones that we've gone to and seeing a lot of the horrific stuff in the moment, it's almost like you just go into full, we call it justice mode, where it's like the ethics and the empathy and all these things just have to go to the side for a minute, and you just got to be locked in and, just be there, be a witness, and be very strong and capture it all. And I think too, early on in my journey, after going through hunting and these kind of things and processing a lot of my own emotions around what's actually happening, there's a little bit of protection from it, because I've already processed it so much that when I'm there, I'm like, okay, this is par for the course. Now you're here to expose it and to share it with the world. But definitely after I've had, massive breakthroughs with releasing just literal, it's the body, is stored in the body. So breath work is a big one that I've had some breakthrough moments with. I think literally coming into deep emotions and realizing instantly I'm brought back into that core emotion, and visually even of a particular moment with an animal and this and that. So that's a powerful one. And then for me, the ocean and cleansing, I come from a Baptist background, and I never really fully, like I got baptized when I was a kid. I didn't understand the power until I got into surfing and realized that the ocean baptizes me every day that I get into it, and cleanses so much. And then pairing that with a meditation for me, like on the beach or somewhere near some water. And I always like to meditate on liberation of all beings, and literally visualize and hear the sounds of, like you said, they have voices, hear the freedom in a moo and in a, these animals. And ultimately something that we want to do with the movement along with this film is create auditory meditation experiences that include some of those sounds and some of that frequency, to where ultimately we don't want to meditate. We have to bear witness to the horrific things that are happening, but in our personal time, I think it's important to visualize freedom and be in that space, because that helps up-level us to that dimension that much faster, especially as a collective. And I think in some ways there's healing through that.
For sure. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to witness even what you guys have witnessed and share with everyone. So everyone turns away, or they look, it becomes a thing, oh, I can't watch that. It's a dark place to go, but it's so admirable to know that you have found a way to continuously do it, to bring that story forward. Because without that, like, in the movie, somebody said it was the conspiracy of silence. And I thought that was so powerful, because when you think about the paradigm, it's all behind closed doors. The government works really, really hard to make sure no one can go in and take a photo of it. No one, like, it's illegal. You're a terrorist if you do that now. Like, the whole thing is like, it's a system built so that we are, as a culture, unaware, except when it's on our plate and we consume it. And so to go into the place that, I think if more people were able to go in and be open empathetically with their heart to see what's happening, there's very, very few people that walk among us that I think would say, I can sit down without a second thought and eat that on my plate. And that's the ultimate disconnection. And so your service, to me, is like you're allowing at least an opportunity, if they're willing to see it. Because without that, no one's ever going to see it. And the places you guys went all over the world, like not just on the spiritual side, but then on the animal and the sentient being side. I mean, we did, the pig saves for 2 weeks straight. And the concept of just being like every morning coming back, and we would cry and we would break down and we'd be like, how are we coping with this? Why are we doing this? But it was the idea that just for this one moment in our life, and it's not a lot, but at least it was that moment, and it helped imprint it into my karma. These animals, they're born into pens, very small, in dirt. They never see sun. They don't see grass. They live a very short life. Instead of 12, 15 years, 6 months, they get thrown into a mechanical beast. They don't know what it is. Driven down a highway. They're starving. They're literally like dehydrating. We were called water angels that summer because it was a heat wave in Toronto, and we would just pour water on them. And it hit me once. I think it was Anita that said, like, their only experience of existence is suffering. They think all of these humans around them are part of that suffering. And for that one moment, somebody comes, we were in the middle of, it's like a highway in Toronto, right before the slaughterhouse. Run out there with some water. It seems so crazy to me to even talk about it now, and share water with these animals that are literally dying on their way to their death. And they felt compassion for that moment. And to me, like, that was like, it was so painful after, but to give someone that compassion and make that deep connection, and then retreat and watch them go, and literally, like, you watch them go into the slaughterhouse and you hear the noises, you smell the smells. It's all happening there. The whole neighborhood. It was called the Slaughterhouse District in Toronto. It stunk until they shut it down. And I think Anita's Pig Save had a big thing to do with that, because it brought a lot of fucking attention to the fact that this is happening in people's backyards. But to go through that process continuously, and that's why Anita, if anyone is listening and wants to support, like, what she's doing with the Save movement, it's unbelievable.
She's been doing it for years and years and years.
It's fucking astounding.
All around the world now.
Yeah, she started a movement
There's
actually.
LA Save and all
And
around.
then,
It's incredible.
Even in my small hometown,
Really?
in the film, there's a there's a
That's
slaughterhouse we visited that I only found because of that movement,
Right.
what was happening there.
And because she did that, I was able to experience for a minute, and which set me on a path. And because you guys are doing that, and going to those hard places, and figuring out what you need to do to cleanse, others are able to bear witness. And so I think like any little thing in the grand mandala of it all that we can all each, anyone listening can do. It's a little contribution of light to a very dark problem.
And also, just to add to what you're saying, cleansing, I found one thing that helped, and maybe what people are watching and listening to this. For me, what also helped is going to sanctuaries afterwards. When you're seeing such darkness, is going and seeing the animals that were rescued and petting them and loving them and hugging them and just like feeling like, oh, you know, there is some light in this darkness was also important.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, the save movement of just giving that one moment of compassion, a moment of life. And people say, can I really make a difference? Like if I don't eat animals, there's 80 billion animals that are killed. It makes a difference to that one life that you gave water to. Even for that 10 seconds, that one life, it made a difference. Maybe not the 80 billion, but that one life it did. That one life. You save that one animal. Like Leonardo da Vinci, which you have in the film, he used to go to the farmer's, the market, and buy a chicken every weekend, and he would let out the chickens. People are like, well, they're just going to buy another chicken, but that chicken's life was saved. That particular animal, because we get caught up in it's overwhelming 80 billion animals, but when you take it down to that one animal, that animal's life, it's really precious.
Just like if it was one human.
Yeah.
You could save one human's life, we would all do it.
Yeah, people are like, what about all the other humans? That one human.
Yeah, that one is enough. It's interesting, the Da Vinci thing. We stayed at a monastery in Nepal, in I think in Kathmandu, the head monk Rinpoche, he started a sanctuary, and it's funny because he's the head, and a lot of the monks underneath him, like the next in commands, don't necessarily align with the way he defines the suffering aspect of Buddhism. But so he started this sanctuary off the property, and he does the exact same thing when he drives through Kathmandu. He purchases animals that are on the side of the road and just drops them off, and then comes back to to do his teachings and whatnot. And I think that's really interesting, and you address a lot of that in your movie as well too, which are these like little inconsistencies that some people jump through these hoops to define things in a way that serves the behavior that they have. So, the monks that do eat meat, yet in Buddhism, it's, you should not, like in most spiritual practices, which I think you brought to nicely, thou shalt not kill. Like, that's a huge thing. And so I find I'm myself attracted to those types of spiritual leaders that make that connection. I think it's really inspiring because it's a difficult thing in a world where the whole world tells you not to make that connection. And in Kathmandu, that sanctuary, like visiting that sanctuary is a dream of ours. When we go back, we will, because it's those moments of light, seeing that one life that was saved. It's so important to focus on the light rather than the dark.
You mentioned earlier before we started on the podcast, the moment of hope being a breakthrough for you while even watching the film. And speaking to what you're saying, you almost took the words out of my mouth with going to sanctuary, but even more specifically, it brought me back to a moment that we had that I don't even know if you remember this, but we were editing, and not only, it's one thing to be in the moment filming it, and it's another thing to watch it on repeat for 2 years while you're editing it. And he and I were on a break, and we were looking for some footage to support a particular aspect of the film, and we came across the YouTube channel Live Kindly, and they had a video on there, and the entire video is nothing but animals standing up for other animals about to get hurt, like a duck about to be, someone's literally got a knife in one hand and they're grabbing the duck with the other, and the other duck flaps its wings and knocks the knife. A crab grabbing another crab as they were putting it into the boiling water to cook, and he's trying to save and cover the other crab. Just these moments, and like we were just in there looking for footage, but we had been watching all this other horrific footage, and the next thing you know, I feel my emotions move, and I'm like, oh man, and then I look over at Kip, and he's just totally lost it, and then we both just like had a moment with processing through that way, because I do think there's a particular thing, even with, sometimes men, it's harder to hit that cry emotion and get to that level. But I think there's that triumph and that hope that sometimes can actually dispel all that energy finally in a powerful way. And Live Kindly, that YouTube channel is a powerful one for that, for
Yeah, I
sure.
love Live Kindly.
Yeah.
That's so cool you brought it up. We'll put that in the show notes for sure. Because those kinds of things, focusing on the light, it's such a... the whole world and all of the things that are going on in this day and age can seem so, like, suffocating. And I think that's what's really neat about, and really powerful about, like, returning to your own light first and then focusing where can I put it
Into your own
into the
truth.
world. And
As well, returning back to your own truth. And you guys, from even some of the things you've put in many different of your movies, the backlash that you receive, not just from people that might be triggered by the subject, but also the corporations that are not happy with the message that you're bringing forward. Can you speak to that a little bit about your journey with all of
yeah,
that?
like the what and the why. Like what
Yeah.
is what is it and why is it there?
Well, a lot of it is money. Let's sum it up. What the Health, you really saw that. After What the Health, there was a big campaign, and that was like, we need to do something about this film. And then one of the biggest articles that was put out was by this lady, Nina Teschholz, and she has ties to the animal agriculture industry, and putting certain books out and putting something where it tries to disprove certain facts of the film. But I mean, it's one of those, it's difficult when you're going up to $1 billion industry or a $1 trillion industry, trying to do a marketing campaign to take this down. And then what people will then say is like, oh, I found this fact that wasn't true, and they don't realize that was the entire What the Health is follow the trail of the facts, not only the money, but the facts. And they don't realize where this information's coming from of that. But I think it's a lot of money and a lot of disinformation. And I feel, on the compassionate side, my heritage, my parents grew up in Utah and Idaho. My dad grew up on a farm. And when we showed Cowspiracy there, a lot of the farmers, they liked the film. And at the end of the day, a lot of them don't want to be doing what they're doing. They're like, oh, support this industry. And they're like, if we had some other option, some other choice, we'd be doing it. We just don't know. We just don't know. So we're in this matrix. But it's difficult going, sometimes it's the government in collusion with the pharmaceutical industry, animal agriculture industry, discussing this with the religions of systemic things that have been happening for 2,000 years. It's a lot.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's happening though.
And it's such an interesting paradigm now too, with the era of people questioning more and more where there might be a collusion or a spiritual aspect, and that going back on even the plant-based vegan movement, people thinking what kind of agenda's there, who's pushing this. And it's like, it's a funny thing, because at the end of the day, it's like, big animal ag is very provable, whereas big broccoli, there's not like a lot of money. In fact, it's proven just in subsidies alone, it's, I think, $373 billion spent in subsidies in the US per year alone on animal agriculture, and only 17 million for fruit and veg.
Wow.
So it's like, you see that toppling effect. It's like, there's definitely the funds and the power to be able to shift the ideology in one direction.
And you're a threat to them. As soon as you start to put a message out to people that there's other alternative ways and healthier ways to sustain yourself, to them, that's a threat to their business. It's a
So
threat.
at what point did it become, like, did you acknowledge that you were a threat as a filmmaker? Like,
Did I acknowledge it, or?
was it brought to your attention, I guess?
Well, Cowspiracy, Howard Lyman in that film, he was the first, not only, he was a dairy farmer that invented industrial dairy farming. He actually invented it with a few group of people. He ended up having thousands, and he has a film called, that shares his story. He was called The Mad Cowboy. Film called Peaceable Kingdom. I highly recommend. It's very old, but it's beautiful film. He had this realization that this is not right. And he's in Cowspiracy, and he told us, it's in the film, he said, "Do you guys know what you're getting yourself into? You know, you put yourself on the line, and you're putting this is serious stuff." And at that time, I was fully ignorant. I had no idea. I didn't even think about that. It just had to be done. And then in the film, Cowspiracy, we'd say we put down the cameras, and we edited that thing. But he was just like, "You got to watch out." And so we put it down. We're like, "Whoa, what are we getting ourselves into?" And then we realized, not doing this is more by not doing this is more dangerous than doing it. Like the impact of not doing it is way greater than if something would happen to us. Like it just, it outweighs. So
What can happen to you?
what's that?
What do you think could happen to you when you?
Or what has like what have they done to try?
Well,
to...
we show some in the film that you see. That we don't give too much away, but yeah, it followed, and I guess I'm saying some of it, but
But even in the past films, like from even What the Health and Cowspiracy.
nothing like you see in this film.
In this
after
one,
What the
okay.
Health into this one, that was a whole nother level. The thing that happened is actually that same Mad Cowboy. When he was on Oprah Winfrey 20 years ago, she made the comment after she learned about the meat industry, and she said, "I don't want to eat another hamburger again." And just by her saying that, the animal agriculture industry sued her for like millions and millions and millions. And rather than just letting that go, that blew up into a worldwide thing. Oprah Winfrey's getting sued, and so it completely backfired.
It was like over 10 years lawsuit, right? It was
Over 10 years
Supreme
lawsuit,
Court.
and it was one of those. After that, they realized we can't do that. So it's kind of like covertly, kind of like if you see the film Dirty Wars, which is a side thing. It's a film on Netflix. It's an incredible film. But they redesigned or how to deal with these issues of doing different underground campaigns, that coming up with these medical data, studies and all these things that you have no idea where they came from. They look like they're legitimate business, and to discredit rather than come out and confront. It's all these very underlying things. So, for example, with What the Health, that was a perfect example. We're going to do an onslaught of disinformation that people don't even know they're referring to these data points and these studies that are linked directly if you really do the research.
Yeah.
But then it came to another level of, after that film, going into this film that we show, that was scary. And at the end of the day, we just feel we're protected by the good or higher forces.
Of course.
And we feel the film, while making the film, it's scary. That's why I was on zero social media, not posting, not doing anything, never talking about this film. But once the film is done, it almost feels like it protects, because then if something happens, whether they try to sue or whatever, like, look, they said that, it proves even more some of the things that they're saying. So we do feel the film protects us as well.
I think it's so interesting because it almost becomes like an information war, like when you put out truth or you're like in your pursuit of that. And I think that's what this is like, it seems like all of your films are the slow reveal of your own discovery captured and presented to an audience. And so that is, to some degree, however much people would like to debate it, that's a truth that you've discovered. Maybe it's not an ultimate truth. We're all human beings. It is what it is. But at the same time, then they like, and I've seen it in social groups. Like I saw after What the Health came out, many social groups getting really into it. And then all it takes is like a seed of doubt, like a study funded by, a company that's aligned with the other side of that truth, and it's astounding to me to see how quickly those that are now challenging a behavior based on what you've discovered, it's so easy to be like, oh no, I was wrong. Look at this. Look at it's the word debunked. Like it's unbelievable. Like this word debunked. Like what is that about? Like it almost seems like it's their emotional reaction to come back to that which is easiest, which is comfort of not changing.
Oh yeah, yeah. If there's a debunking, because they don't want it to be true, and so they find something. Oh, thank God. It's not true. Okay, move on. And that was really frustrating, especially that film.
How do you deal with that frustration?
Man, it was tough. I mean, it was a cam during the middle of that, and part of it is we were interviewing people that we were going to put in this film that we decided not to, because again, what one you want to feed, but we had a powerful section in this film that was one of the main trying to debunk this film in an interview that just completely, when you see this interview, then you see how it operates and the ridiculousness of it. But it's difficult. It's difficult. One of the things always, it's a mantra: the truth will reveal itself. Whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or 20 years, the truth is going to come out. And just like it has in Cowspiracy, that first couple of years, there's a lot of controversy. Now it's very, other than some of this thing that's been brought up lately, regeneration of the Allen Savory of soil through animal farming, that's been completely debunked. That's kind of come up recently, but after this film, we're going to do a side-by-side study to disprove that once and for all about animal farming versus veganic gardening. But anyway, it's difficult to
you guys probably know Nimai Delgado, the plant-based bodybuilder.
I don't know.
He's a friend of mine. I credit him recently. I told Kip, he said something really powerful on this topic, because he had a lot of people recently. Someone made a video on him from like the carnivore movement or whatever, and posed a few things, and he, everybody kind of came after him, and it was such an easy thing to respond to clear it up. It could have just been one video and tweet that he was going to do, and then he slept on it. He realized, like, almost the feeding the wolf thing. He said, You know what? He said, it's like a stray cat. I feed this, and then more are going to come. They're all going to come and want to try to get on this and get on this. He said, you know what? I have an inbox full of people that really want to learn and really want to understand this at a deeper level. And if I'm spending my time on this, then I'm not spending my time educating the people that are really in it to learn and to ask questions in a certain kind of way. And so that's powerful. And too, I think, like with What the Health, that, like he mentioned, we kind of went down that road of looking into that, and most of the studies, or the people that were speaking out on that and in the debunking videos and all of that, almost all of them referred back to a particular writing from the woman he mentioned.
Right.
And we may or may not share some contents in the future about that, but it's very much like, it's like you said, it's one thing gets put out, and then everyone grabs on and it spreads in this particular way.
It's interesting. I think it's great to have these conversations. I think it's great we're having this. I invite people to discuss all of the ethical sides and all of the health sides and all of the impact of the world and on the earth, because I think that's healthy. And that's the idea is like, I've been not eating meat for many years, but I'm always open to having a discussion about it. And I think I hope that there's people that eat meat that are listening to this and that have thoughts and want to put things in the comments and start conversations about it. I just hope that it comes from a place of curiosity and of seeking to live at a higher frequency, seeking to find what's ethically right for them, their truth. Like, I think that's what's really important, is if you have that question, is go and explore. And it's amazing, because I watch your movies, and that's a human being who has a question, who's exploring it. And what you reveal in these times, whether it is about your movies, there's so many subjects going on right now. And I think at this moment in history, is so interesting when the conspiracies are being proven correct, like over and over again. It seems in the last 2 years, since even the beginning of COVID, like so many things that weren't allowed to be spoken about, or that you would be literally like kicked off social media if you mentioned. At this point, now they're becoming, oh yeah, that was right, actually, in the end. Like, it's a fascinating time. So I think the curiosity level for truth is at an all-time high. And I encourage anyone, through this discussion, through your films, through the film that's coming out that's astounding. And I cannot honestly recommend it enough to anyone listening, to support it when it comes out, and to engage with it, like, intellectually and spiritually.
Open your mind to it.
Like,
just be open and see what all information, what it comes at you and how it means to you and your truth. And just let that be guided. I think it's important, because a lot of the times I think some people, they see like veganism, it's like, there's like pointing fingers at people. Oh, if you don't eat this way, then like you're bad and I'm good. And it's like, no, this is just about inclusion and opening all of our minds to bring the yogic perspective of oneness. Like, let's all see each other as you were saying, brothers and sisters, but not just human and animal. And let's find this beautiful harmonic way to live together and talk and have open conversations and listen. You know, that's what it's all about, is just having these conversations and being compassionate to one another and helping one another as well. Because I know many friends that have decided to partake in, okay, I want to try to shift my lifestyle and maybe not even go vegan fully, but reduce my intake. And then maybe I'll go vegetarian, and maybe I'll take out, you know what I mean, and take these steps. And we just need to be supportive and help one another. How do you do that? You know, and being compassionate to each other.
When
through
it's
these
hard,
ways.
change is hard.
Of course, any change is hard.
Like, how did you guys decide?
Well, one thing about that is being a true seeker. I think that's one things we have, and a lot of people we've met, and especially in the animal rights community, where true seeker, if you really want to, this connection we keep talking about, it always comes back to connection. One of the film titles was called just Connect, or Connection. Possibilities is that if you really want to seek this more than the other films, because it is like a philosophical, ethical, finding your own truth, where the other ones, oh, let's do data on if animal culture works or not for the environment, climate change and health, all these studies. This one's a questioning of yourself, of who you are. We're talking about inner child, going to a sanctuary, going to a pig save, where it's one of those, it gets to a point where there's not, I can prove this right or wrong. It's about your internal journey with this film, and just asking questions. And if you want to go deep, really make that connection to other animals. They do have a voice, and then discovering that. And that's what's beautiful about this film, we feel, is that it can, in a very compassionate way, explores these ways of, you know, looking at the subject rather than like a logical.
In the word question is quest. And I feel it's, you know, you earlier said the finger pointing, right? That reminds me of an exclamation point. I have the answer, you know, it's this exclamatory statement. And I feel, coming from a religious background, we all know they can have a lot of answers and not many room for questions. And I experience that quite often when, funny enough, in my particular, you know, background of religion with Jesus at the center, all he did was ask questions. In fact, when people were wanting answers from him, he answered with a question. And I think, too, similarly, within the vegan plant-based movement, there could be a lot more questions, a lot less answers, you know. And one way I like to think about it that's fun is, you know, a question mark is very curvature, it's very feminine. A exclamation point is linear and very masculine point to point. But a question as answered, the two together, it's called an interrobang. It's like the perfect balance of masculine and feminine. So when you think you have an answer, turn it into a question and see what happens. Really and I feel that's what led this on our journey.
Wow. Well, thank you guys. I mean, this has been such an incredible conversation to have with the two of you, and to learn more about this. And, you know, for everyone that's watching and listening to this, of course, all the links to What the Health, Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, all of that will be here, and also all the other ways that people can start to support this new film. I can't wait for it to be out. People to
I guess we'll put the newsletter sign up for you guys, because I think there's going to be some really huge and amazing announcements as this new film comes to light.
Yeah, please definitely go to Christspiracy.com, sign up for the newsletter. And even if you aren't interested in this topic, if you are any remotely way a creator or want to support creating in a new transformative way, that our next podcast is going to be really exciting, that we do our part two. Not only dive deep into about the film, but this new paradigm that we want to collaborate with a lot of creators. It's exciting. So please sign up for the newsletter, and we'll keep it posted on how that's going to look too.
That's incredible. Well, thank you guys for making the time.
Thank you so much.
I think this was also very serendipitous.
Yes.
The way this all came together.
The way it all came together.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. So thank you guys.
So it was an honor, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look forward to the next one.
Amazing.
Stay
tuned for part 2 coming soon, guys.
All right, there you have it. The 10th episode of Stars and Destruct is complete.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode today. This was such a fun and incredible conversation with Kip and Kam.
And don't forget to follow and subscribe to support Stars and Destruct on our mission to bring these kinds of conversations to you.
And also, remember to go to Christspiracy.com to learn all about amazing information about this new film, where you can watch it, and we really hope you can see it for yourself, because it will blow your mind. So stay tuned.
And don't forget, follow and subscribe.